Be a leader: how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. Have you ever tried to correct someone, maybe a friend, a coworker, or even a family member, only to watch them shut down, get defensive, or worse, resent you for it? What if I told you that you can get people to change, not by pushing, arguing, or pointing out their flaws, but in a way that makes them actually want to listen, want to improve, and want to follow your lead? That's exactly what we're diving into today. In this episode, we'll explore the secret psychology of influence and leadership from Part 4 of How to Win Friends and Influence People, Be a Leader: How to Change People Without Giving Offense or Arousing Resentment. This is not about forcing authority, manipulating, or demanding change. Instead, we're uncovering subtle yet powerful techniques that the world's greatest leaders, from Abraham Lincoln to modern CEOs, have used to get the best out of people. And here's the twist: you might think you need to be charismatic or naturally persuasive to lead people effectively. But as you'll see, the real secret lies in something much simpler, yet so counterintuitive that most people overlook it. Stick around, because by the end of this video, I'll share a shockingly easy but often ignored technique that can instantly make you more influential, whether you're dealing with a stubborn boss, an unmotivated team, or even a difficult family situation. Relatable problem setup. Why is it that so many of us, when trying to correct or advise others, end up creating tension instead of cooperation? Maybe you've been there, trying to get a coworker to change sloppy work habits, or a friend to quit an unhealthy routine, or a child to be more responsible. Instead of hearing, "Wow, thank you, I'm on it," you get eye rolls, defensive arguments, or even silent resentment. Sound familiar? Many times, our instinct is to tell it like it is, thinking that direct honesty, sometimes served with a side of sternness, will get the job done. But ironically, that approach often backfires. Our well-intended truth can sting, bruise someone's pride, and sabotage the very change we want. And it's not just about others, is it? We secretly wish we could be corrected more gently. We wish people respected our own dignity, let us keep our sense of pride, and gave us a reason to want to transform ourselves. If you've ever dreamt of having that skill, the ability to lead people in a way that triggers enthusiastic cooperation, Part 4 of Dale Carnegie's classic is your new best friend. By the end of this deep dive, you'll know exactly how to handle these delicate situations like a pro, with zero offense and maximum respect. Ready for some actionable principles, real-life stories, and advanced psychological hacks that can make your relationships flow smoother than ever? In the next segments, we'll break down, chapter by chapter, each principle that Dale Carnegie says can help you become the kind of leader people admire. Let's begin with the first principle in this segment, a principle so simple that it's often overlooked, but so powerful it can turn an enemy into a lifelong friend. Principle 1: If you must find fault, this is the way to begin. We start with a fundamental concept that might surprise you with its straightforwardness: begin with praise and honest appreciation. Carnegie likens this approach to the Novocaine a dentist uses before drilling. Praise eases the discomfort of the correction that follows. When you soften someone's defensive wall with genuine acknowledgement of their strengths, your suggestions or criticisms become far easier to swallow. Carnegie shares a story about President Calvin Coolidge, famously dubbed Silent Cal. He complimented his secretary on her dress before reminding her to be more careful with punctuation. By leading with praise, "That's a pretty dress you are wearing," he made the subsequent critique land softly. The secretary, instead of being offended, blushed and felt valued. Imagine you're leading a virtual team meeting and one of your teammates consistently turns reports in late. Instead of starting with, "Hey, you keep missing deadlines," you might say, "I've noticed how thorough your reports are and how each one shows real insight. That's a standout quality. I'd love to see if there's a way we can ensure these valuable insights come in on time, so everyone benefits." The difference is night and day. Neuroscience suggests that when we feel appreciated, our brain releases dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. That boosts motivation, reinforcing the desire to cooperate. If the conversation starts with negativity, stress hormones, like cortisol, spike, fueling defensiveness. Thus, praise literally primes the brain to be open to correction. Key line: it is always easier to listen to unpleasant things after we have heard some praise of our good points. Next time you must address a problem, ask yourself, what do I genuinely respect about this person? Express that first. Not only do you reduce tension, but you also honor their self-worth. Write down 3 positive qualities you admire about someone you need to correct. Begin your chat by acknowledging those qualities. Notice how quickly the vibe shifts from threatened to receptive. Principle 2. How to criticize, and not be hated for it. Even if you open with praise, direct criticism can still backfire. That's where Dale Carnegie's second principle steps in: call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. This chapter challenges that knee-jerk reaction to say, "You messed up." Instead, it's about subtle redirection. Charles Schwab, the steel magnate, famously found employees smoking under a "no smoking" sign. Instead of humiliating them, he handed out cigars and said, "I'll appreciate it if you smoke these outside." He never used harsh commands or pointed fingers. Result? The men listened and respected him more, because they weren't publicly shamed. Have you seen how some managers handle a staff member's repeated tardiness? They might snap, "Late again, I see. This is unacceptable." Carnegie's approach would be different, maybe pulling them aside, saying, "I really appreciate the energy you bring when you're here. I'd love to see that energy from the very start of the workday." The point is, highlight the discrepancy gently, often letting them realize the solution themselves. Simply changing one three-letter word can often spell the difference between failure and success in changing people without giving offense or arousing resentment. Here, Carnegie discusses how the word "but" can undermine your initial compliment. "You did great on this project, but you missed these details," can overshadow the praise. Swap it for, and, "You did great on this project, and if you keep an eye on those small details, it could be stellar." That subtle shift keeps positivity intact. Scene opens at a dinner table. A father notices his teenage son, Jake, glued to his phone, barely engaging in conversation. Instead of scolding him outright, he takes a different approach. Dad, smiling, setting down his fork, "You know, Jake, I was just thinking about how much I appreciate our conversations. Some of my favorite moments are when we're just talking about life, your ideas, and those wild theories of yours about the universe." Jake looks up, intrigued but still half distracted. "Dad," leaning in slightly, lowering his voice, "I kinda miss that. Do you think we can bring those moments back, maybe just start with dinner time?" Jake blinks, hesitates, then smirks. "Jake, yeah. I guess I do talk a lot when I'm not scrolling through memes." Dad chuckles. Jake, without being told, puts his phone down. Instead of saying, "You're always on your phone. You never talk to us," which would trigger defensiveness, the dad starts with appreciation and asks a question that gently guides Jake towards self-awareness. The next time you need to correct a family member, begin with a positive statement, then phrase your request as a question. You might be surprised at how effortlessly they respond. Principle 3. Talk about your own mistakes first. Chapter 3 hits on an often overlooked method: if you need to show someone they're wrong, first admit your own failings in that area. This is about relatability. Carnegie says, talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. Why does this matter so much? Carnegie mentions how he used to correct his young niece Josephine by first reminding himself, "Dale, you made far worse mistakes at her age." By starting with humility, like, "I did the same silly stuff at your age," he softened the blow. Josephine, seeing he wasn't on a high horse, became far more open. Studies on persuasion indicate that self-disclosure lowers the other person's defenses. It triggers empathy. "Oh, they've been in my shoes." This empathy short-circuits the typical shame or guilt that can arise during confrontation. Suppose you have a friend overspending their budget. Instead of lecturing, "You're blowing your money on nonsense," you can say, "I remember a time I got into trouble with credit cards. It was tough. Here's how I learned to manage it better. Maybe some of these steps might help you, too." You were not born with judgment. That comes only with experience, and you are better than I was at your age. That line captures the heart of this principle: show you're not perfect and that mistakes are part of the journey. This approach fosters a cooperative spirit, not a combative standoff. Principle 4. No one likes to take orders. Scene transitions to a dynamic, collaborative office space. Let's face it, being told what to do can feel belittling, especially in settings where people crave respect and autonomy. Carnegie's principle in Chapter 4 is crystal clear: instead of barking commands, ask questions to invite involvement. Dale Carnegie highlights O&D Young, an influential businessman who managed to avoid giving direct orders entirely. Young would say things like, "Do you think that would work?" or "What if we tried it this way?" By posing these questions, he effectively placed responsibility in his team's hands, transforming what could have been a top-down directive into a collaborative problem-solving session. Because they owned part of the decision, they felt a personal stake in its success, carrying it out with more dedication than if they'd simply been commanded. Think of a manager who demands, "I need you to come in on Saturday to finish these reports." Not only is that abrupt, it also sidelines the employee's perspective or constraints. A better approach might be, "How do you think we can meet our Monday deadline without overwhelming everyone?" This subtle shift signals trust and respect. It says, "I value your insight, let's find a solution together." Not only does this reduce resistance, it often sparks creative ideas the manager hadn't considered. In essence, questions invite partnership and hand people a sense of agency, crucial for fostering genuine cooperation. Human beings have a deep-rooted desire for autonomy. When we're allowed, even in small ways, to shape our tasks and timelines, we're far likelier to invest wholeheartedly. We tap into our natural creativity, feel in control, more creative, and more inclined to say yes, because the idea feels like ours rather than something forced upon us. By simply swapping a directive for a question, you give others the dignity of choice, a subtle but mighty shift. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. It's a short principle with enormous impact. Next time you're about to issue a direct command, pause. Convert it into a question that invites input. You'll be amazed how often this small tweak fosters stronger relationships, unearths better solutions, and earns genuine cooperation. Principle 5. Let the other person save face. Camera angle softens, possibly focusing on a moment of empathy. This might be one of the most heartfelt principles: let the other person save face. Carnegie demonstrates it with the story of how General Electric reassigned the brilliant Charles Steinmetz, who was failing as a department head, without humiliating him. They gave him a new role, consulting engineer, without making it seem like a demotion. This might be one of the most heartfelt and far-reaching principles in how to win friends and influence people. Dale Carnegie illustrates it through the story of Charles Steinmetz, an electrical genius whose brilliance didn't extend to managing a department. General Electric had to remove Steinmetz from his leadership role, but without damaging his dignity, triggering resentment, or humiliating him. Rather than demoting him publicly, they gave him a new title, consulting engineer, essentially allowing him to continue his specialized work without any blow to his pride. Steinmetz kept his self-respect, and the company retained a genius. That delicate, empathetic approach embodies what Carnegie means by "let the other person save face." We often ride roughshod over people's feelings if we highlight shortcomings or mistakes too bluntly, especially in front of others. This robs them of dignity. And once that sense of respect is gone, trust and loyalty vanish with it. By discreetly handling sensitive issues, much like GE did with Steinmetz, we preserve the other person's self-esteem, making them far more likely to cooperate or even excel in a redefined role. I have no right to say or do anything that diminishes a man in his own eyes. This is from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, as cited by Carnegie. That line resonates deeply. When people lose face, they lose self-respect. A short-term fix might become a long-term problem because resentment grows in the shadows. These words epitomize the core strategy. Even in tough decisions, there is a way to handle matters so that everyone walks away with dignity intact. Firing someone? Telling them they're no longer needed can be demoralizing. Instead, highlight the strengths they showed, how their talents might fit better elsewhere, and that the door remains open for collaboration in the future. This delicate approach doesn't negate the difficult reality, but it does preserve their sense of self-worth. Always consider that the other person's pride is on the line. If you want them to join you wholeheartedly in the future, let them exit the situation with their dignity intact. Principle 6. How to spur people on to success. Shift to a bright, encouraging setting, possibly an outdoor location to symbolize growth. In Chapter 6, Carnegie zeroes in on what he calls one of the greatest motivators in human interaction: praise, not shallow flattery, but sincere, specific appreciation. This seemingly simple act holds enormous power to transform people's behavior and self-image. Praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. Carnegie points out how even animals, like dogs, respond far better to a pat on the head and a positive word than a scolding or punishment. If they can flourish under encouragement, how much more can we? He reminds us of the young Enrico Caruso, whose teacher insisted he had no voice at all and was better off giving up. Instead, his mother's unwavering praise, even for the smallest sign of progress, ignited his passion and confidence, leading him to become one of the greatest opera singers in history. Modern psychology, especially B.F. Skinner's research on behaviorism, validates Carnegie's approach. Positive reinforcement cements desired behaviors far more effectively than punishment. Criticism or scolding may stop an unwanted action momentarily, but it rarely nurtures a person's desire to keep improving. Praise, on the other hand, taps into our innate craving for acknowledgement and approval. Have you ever seen a team meeting where the boss rattles off a list of every mistake made, then ends with, "Any questions?" The atmosphere turns cold, morale dips, and turnover is sure to rise. Now contrast that with a leader who highlights any signs of growth, like an employee who finishes a project a bit sooner than usual or delivers a slightly more polished presentation. By celebrating these micro-victories, the team begins to crave that positivity and naturally strives for bigger wins. Abilities wither under criticism, they blossom under encouragement. This phrase encapsulates the essential truth: a barrage of negativity crushes potential, while thoughtful praise makes it flourish. The next time you spot even a small improvement, maybe your colleague manages their time better, or a friend sticks to a personal goal, call attention to it immediately. Don't wait for major achievements, little victories deserve recognition, too. Over time, these small acknowledgments accumulate into profound transformations, often faster than you'd ever expect. Principle 7. Give a dog a good name. This principle is genius in its simplicity: give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. When someone's performance takes a dip, our instinct might be to label them lazy or incompetent, but doing that only cements a negative identity in their mind. As Carnegie points out, people often fulfill the reputation we hand them, so we should hand them the best one possible. We meet Marie the dishwasher, a young Belgian servant perceived as clumsy and unattractive. One single comment, "You do not know what treasures are within you," completely changed her self-image. She began caring more about her appearance, gained self-confidence, and in time, elevated her entire situation. By seeing Marie as someone with value and potential, instead of just a dishwasher, her employer gave her a positive reputation to embody. Principle 8. Make the fault seem easy to correct. Scene might shift to a comedic montage of someone learning a new skill, stumbling, and receiving encouraging words. Chapter 8 focuses on the powerful idea: use encouragement. Make the fault seem easy to correct. When we brand someone's mistakes as huge or insurmountable, they often freeze up in discouragement, afraid that no matter what they do, they'll still fail. But if we suggest that success is well within reach, people are far more likely to persist until they see real progress. Dale Carnegie relates the story of a friend who tried to learn dancing later in life. His first teacher told him bluntly, "You'll have to forget everything and start over." It felt like a harsh reset. Disheartened, he nearly quit. A second teacher, however, took a gentler path. "Your fundamentals are all right. You won't have trouble learning a few new steps." That spark of hope, the idea that he was already halfway there, gave him the push he needed to keep going. As Carnegie's friend recalled, "At any rate, I know I am a better dancer than I would have been if she hadn't told me I had a natural sense of rhythm. That encouraged me. That gave me hope. That made me want to improve." Modern neuroscience supports this. Believing "I can do this" triggers reward circuits in the brain, fueling motivation and what researchers call a growth mindset. Conversely, if we're told we're hopeless, we often quit to avoid repeated failure or humiliation. Encouragement, even on small wins, can be the difference between someone giving up after a stumble or persisting until they master the task. Helping a relative lose weight or improve fitness. Swap statements like, "You're so out of shape," for, "You've already shown you can do a solid 30-minute walk, let's build on that." Guiding a coworker who struggles with presentations? Rather than saying, "You freeze every time you speak," try, "You're great at organizing your thoughts, let's build confidence so the delivery matches your content." You're offering an attainable first step, rather than an overwhelming final leap. Tell your child, your spouse, or your employee that he or she is stupid or dumb at a certain thing, and you have destroyed almost every incentive to try to improve. Turn that logic around. Emphasize each person's flicker of potential, show them they're already on the right track, and they'll chase that vision more fiercely than you'd ever expect. Principle 9. Making people glad to do what you want. We return to a wide shot with an excited tone, as if unveiling the final piece of a puzzle. Make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. In other words, when you need someone to follow through on a task, be it at home, at work, or in your circle of friends, the key is to present it in a way that feels like a genuine opportunity, not a burden. Here's the essence: people often resist when they sense your request only serves your needs. But when you show them how it aligns with their goals, values, or self-image, they become eager collaborators. Dale Carnegie vividly illustrates this using Woodrow Wilson's approach in inviting William Gibbs McAdoo to become Secretary of the Treasury. Instead of saying, "I need you to do this for me," Wilson spoke so graciously that McAdoo felt honored to serve, a shift from mere compliance to passionate engagement. Carnegie also mentions how Wilson cleverly navigated interpersonal dynamics by ensuring people felt too important for certain tasks rather than insulted or unwanted. Even when turning someone down or shifting a role, Wilson or his advisors positioned the change so that the other party felt recognized, valued, and central to the bigger picture. The result? Less offense, more goodwill. Take the difference between a rushed recruiter who says, "We're desperate for a new project manager, can you start Monday?" versus one who exclaims, "Your knack for creative problem solving is exactly what our next big project needs. We'd be thrilled to have someone with your expertise join us." The second approach highlights the candidate's strengths and future potential, making them glad to accept. In family life, a parent might say, "Your sense of responsibility is such a huge help around the house, could you organize the weekend groceries in your own creative way?" That subtle shift can encourage a child or teenager to feel like a key team member, not a reluctant errand runner. Always emphasize what's in it for them. Whether it's recognition, skill development, or personal satisfaction, show them they're not just doing you a favor, they're stepping into an opportunity that boosts their sense of accomplishment. When people see themselves as the hero of the story, they don't feel manipulated, they feel motivated. Remember how we teased a counterintuitive trick that can spark massive social capital? This is it. Wrap your requests in an authentic package of personal benefit, make the other person the star, the champion. They'll leap at the chance to rise to that role, and you'll become the leader who inspires rather than dictates. And that transformation, whether you're guiding a team, a friend, or a family, is truly priceless. 3. Actionable steps. Now that we've dissected each principle, let's condense this wisdom into a set of immediate steps you can take. Here are your mission objectives, the real-life psychological hacks. Principle 1. Begin with praise and honest appreciation. Whenever you need to address a concern or correct someone, start by highlighting something they've done well. Even a small positive can prime the conversation for smoother acceptance. The result, the other person feels respected and is more open to hearing about what needs to change. Principle 2. Call attention to mistakes indirectly. Replace blunt criticism with subtle, constructive guidance. Ask a gentle question or offer an observation that lets them spot the issue themselves. You respect their dignity, reduce defensiveness, and encourage self-improvement. Principle 3. Talk about your own mistakes first. Before pointing out someone else's error, briefly share a relatable mistake of your own. Show empathy by admitting you've stumbled, too. This humanizes you, lowers their guard, and fosters a feeling of, "we're in this together." Principle 4. Ask questions instead of giving orders. Next time you want an action done, phrase it as a question. For instance, "Could we consider adjusting the timeline?" Or, "How about we try this approach?" Result, higher engagement, creative input, and a sense of autonomy. Transform demands into genuine questions. "How do you think we can solve this?" Or, "Could we adjust our approach?" People feel involved, valued, and empowered, which boosts their willingness to follow through. Principle 5. Let the other person save face. When someone errs, avoid humiliating or shaming them. Offer tactful feedback in private or frame a new title/role to preserve their pride. They maintain dignity, remain receptive, and are more likely to stay loyal instead of growing resentful. Principle 6. Praise the slightest improvement, be lavish in your praise. Anytime you see progress, no matter how small, spotlight it. Use specific compliments that highlight exactly what they did right. Encouragement accelerates growth, fosters motivation, and sparks a positive feedback loop. Principle 7. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. Speak of people as though they already possess the qualities you want them to develop. "I know you're someone who takes pride in punctuality." They're inspired to match that positive portrayal, striving to live up to the new, uplifting identity. Principle 8. Make the fault seem easy to correct. Instead of harping on difficulties, express confidence in their ability to improve. Minimize the perceived challenge and emphasize their potential. They feel empowered rather than defeated, and progress becomes an appealing, achievable goal. Principle 9. Make the other person glad to do what you want. Frame tasks or changes so they serve the other person's interests, highlighting benefits or how it aligns with their personal goals. Instead of grudging compliance, you get genuine enthusiasm. People become eager collaborators rather than reluctant participants. Each of these 9 principles is a cornerstone of effective leadership. Practice them consistently, and you'll find that instead of forcing cooperation, you'll inspire it, both at work and in your everyday relationships. 4. Grand Finale. We've journeyed through the golden chapters of Part 4 in how to win friends and influence people, exploring strategies to correct others gently, to spark motivation, and to lead with empathy. If you remember only one thing from all these pages, let it be this. Respecting someone's dignity is the most effective way to bring about change. Every principle here circles back to that core idea, whether it's leading with praise, acknowledging your own mistakes, or making the other person feel like the hero in the story. If you can preserve their pride and sense of self, you can guide them anywhere. So, how will you use these principles? Will you approach your next conflict with open, curious questions rather than harsh statements? Will you give people a reputation to live up to rather than a label that drags them down? Each day gives us countless chances, small conversations, bigger disputes, passing remarks on social media, to be the person who builds others up instead of tearing them down. That, my friends, is the hallmark of a true leader. If you found these insights valuable, hit that subscribe button and share this video with one person who needs to hear it. Comment below on which principle you're most excited to try. Is it starting with praise? Or perhaps letting others save face? Your feedback might just inspire someone else to try, too. Thank you for staying with me on this deep dive. Remember, when you apply the principles from Part 4, you're not just influencing people, you're illuminating their better nature. And in a world that's increasingly noisy and divisive, that gentle, transformative leadership might be our greatest superpower.